Hello, and welcome to the Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches working in the child welfare field. I'm your host, Bill James, and today we'll be joined by Laurie Fortin, who will have some thoughts and observations on professional quality of life and vicarious resilience. I'm Bill James, and we'll be right back. So, hi Laurie, thank you for joining us today and helping us out with this topic. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I recently came on with the Academy as a practice consultant with San Diego County, but I have worked in the child welfare and child abuse field for 25 years, working with victims and perpetrators, primarily in sexual abuse. That's been my specialization. And having worked direct service for 25 years, I'm very in tune to the potential impact of this work on us as helpers. And so it's kind of a, I wouldn't say a passion, but a strong interest of mine to help preserve and sustain those of us that are working in this field.
Wow, so it's great that you're interested in that, especially being a professional in the field myself. So, we've heard about vicarious trauma in the past, but can you tell us a little bit more about what that encompasses?
Sure. Vicarious trauma is a term that's used to describe how we as professionals can be negatively impacted by repeated exposure to the trauma that our clients have gone through, whether it's hearing those stories over and over, seeing some of that trauma, seeing them being traumatized, and having that ongoing empathic engagement with the trauma victims that we work with. And over time, such exposure has shown to impact us really on all levels, physically, psychologically, as well as our spiritual well-being. And when chronically exposed to such indirect trauma, professionals can really start to suffer from symptoms of hopelessness, helplessness, being agitated, angry, irritability, hypervigilance, cynicism, pessimism, fear, mistrust, might impact their sleep, exhaustion. They might start having some physical or somatic complaints, a sense of apathy, kind of detachment, numbness, and actually sometimes wanting to avoid even having to deal with our clients. And we think about that it affects us professionally, but it really does have a ripple effect into our personal life as well, so that it impacts not just the work we're trying to do with those clients, but it can impact our families, our friends, and ultimately the organization that we're working for.
Wow, so that's really a bad complex of complications and difficulties for people to suffer. Are pretty much all professionals subject to this kind of negative impact?
Well, I think some people come to the helping field more predisposed than others of being affected, such as those that might have their own trauma history, those people that have poor internal coping themselves. We talk a lot about our clients wanting our clients to have a support network, but if we don't have a support network, that could impact us more greatly. If we don't have really a connectedness to some kind of meaning or hope or purpose in our life, we could be more susceptible. And then, of course, if we're dealing with multiple other personal stressors on top of the stressors of work and dealing with our clients, could make us more susceptible as well.
So it sounds like almost everybody is at risk, but those of us who are maybe more isolated or a little more vulnerable because of compromised situations are at elevated risk. What are some ways that helping professionals can cope with vicarious trauma?
Well, I've learned kind of through the years that really the bottom line is no one's going to take care of you but you. And that I think that you don't really, you start doing the work and you don't really realize how important putting some preventative measures in place are really important to combating and avoiding the cumulative effect of the vicarious trauma. So doing simple things like taking your lunch away from your desk or eating with your peers, not talking about work during lunch, setting good boundaries for yourself and with others, leaving work at work, trying not to do emails and phone calls on the weekend, playing on the weekends, laughing, having hobbies, church, meditate, exercise, sleep, all those things that we talk about, what we should do in those self-care behaviors. We talk a lot about what we should do, but most of us actually don't really do that very well. And it really is a preventative measure to engage in some of these behaviors. On top of, and then it's nice to have the added bonus to your own self-care plan. But when you work for an organization that identifies the potential impact and values that, and then implements things in the workplace that help, at an organization level, that also help support workers taking care of themselves, like peer support groups, learning circles, coaching, bringing in outside experts for some kind of group processing, and then social activities, yoga, mindfulness, walking at lunch. There's a lot of things that organizations have more recently sponsored to help support and sustain their workforce. But I want to introduce something different that we really haven't talked about, that's been less talked about. And that is that for individuals and organizations to highlight the good part of our work with our clients and to really celebrate their successes, so that we have a balanced view of the work that we're doing that just doesn't look at the negative impact, but we're also acknowledging and celebrating the positive impact that we're doing with clients. And that term is called vicarious resiliency.
So, vicarious resilience, that's a relatively new term. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Well, just in the same way that workers can be negatively impacted by their traumatized clients, they can be positively impacted by the incredible resiliency, courage, perseverance, and hope that their clients have and can demonstrate. In fact, professionals who are actively aware of vicarious resiliency and have internalized its benefits reported that they feel more satisfied, inspired, and appreciative of their own life. They feel empowered. It has shown to increase their self-esteem. It has increased and enabled them to find new meaning in their work, and it has helped to sustain them in their profession.
So, wow, that seems like a lot of really positive potential impacts. How do we operationalize this and bring vicarious resiliency to our workforce?
Well, I think the first step is just having the awareness and recognition that there are positive and negative effects to one's work. Viewing one's work from a balanced viewpoint and what has been coined or called having a professional quality of life. And in that kind of good and bad balance with vicarious trauma and vicarious resiliency is also compassion, fatigue, and compassion satisfaction. And so although I appreciate all the attention and thought that both individuals and organizations have put into helping curb vicarious trauma or kind of cope with it, I'd love to see an equal amount of attention given to the value of vicarious resiliency. A lot of organizations with I'm sure, Bill, have heard the term appreciative inquiry, but as it suggests, what you pay attention to grows. So if the focus is only on the doom and the gloom and the costs of our jobs of caring, we tend to become what we think, or what we focus on becomes our reality. So if we're only focusing on that negative, that's how we're going to see things. I think one of the ways that we can message vicarious resiliency is in how it so nicely parallels or aligns with safety organized practice, which is our practice modality and framework within child welfare in many counties. It really aligns nice with the language, the philosophy, in that it reinforces the need and benefit of a strength-based perspective I think identifying the strengths and successes in our clients indirectly actually benefits us. And it also complements that balanced assessment approach that we want to do with families, looking at what's working well and what's not working well. We want to do that in our own, with our own selves and within our own work. It also provides opportunities to reframe vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue in a different, more positive manner. And with that, workers can develop their own kind of safety or wellness goal and their own safety or wellness plan that includes looking at their own behavior that's kind of dangerous to them or harmful to them, as well as the things that they've built in to kind of protect them, the protective capacities. And I think supervisors are in a good position to help reinforce and reframe and do some appreciative inquiry around workers' experiences that can help reaffirm and keep vicarious resiliency at the forefront.
So how cool is it that there's kind of a convergence between this concept and safety organized practice, and the need to maintain almost an attitude of gratitude in terms of noticing what kind of positive impact we are having with clients, and remembering what kind of successes and gains our families and clients have made, and then having supervisory staff be purposeful in how they help the folks they supervise maintain that kind of balanced view. Do you have any stories from your own experience that illustrate this concept at work?
Well, I wish I had known of this term, vicarious resiliency, in my prior work as a forensic interviewer, which I did for 15 years, because I think about the focus really was on the vicarious trauma, and coming out of interview after interview and almost all the time thinking, oh, that poor kid, and that's so horrible. And we kind of sit around and kind of process the bad part of that and how awful and how sad. And I wish I would have had the introduction to this concept, because I think how different that might have impacted me if I would have come out and looked at it from a resiliency perspective, like, wow, that kid was amazing. The courage that child had. Wow, did you see how well that mother supported that child when she came out of the interview? Just looking at it and reframing it differently probably would have impacted me much better and differently over 15 years.
Actually, bringing a whole new awareness to this process, it sounds like.
That's right. And then recently, just kind of using this concept through safety organized practice coaching, we have what we call the safety house tool to use, that workers can use with children to kind of create what their safe house would look like. And I happen to be coaching to a group of workers who were pretty burned out, some compassion fatigue, really struggling with some of the traumatic work that their clients were dealing with. And I had them pull out that, quote, safety house, and I had them label it their house of wellness and had them create it for themselves. And as we do with kids, asking those critical questions around, what would you allow in this house of wellness? What would the rules be to keep it well? What activities would be going on? So that they're thinking of ways to be protective of their well-being and keeping out those dangerous or toxic things. It was great. They really appreciated the insight and awareness, and how, creatively using a tool for a child for themselves as well. And then just yesterday, when I was talking to a supervisor about this concept of vicarious resilience, she was thinking back to just last week where she had a worker out in the field that got a pretty graphic and overwhelming disclosure from a child about sexual abuse. And the supervisor felt bad because it was 5:30. She had her child in the car. She was going home and felt like she hadn't really given the work or the time that she needed to kind of process it. And over the weekend, or as we were talking about the vicarious resiliency, she came up with the idea, okay, well, I can't change that what I did, but I feel like because she needs to go watch the forensic interview this week, I can prep her for that. I can help her reframe this experience that through some appreciative inquiry questions to ask herself and formulate some questions at the end of the interview to be able to focus on that exposure of observing the interview in a more positive kind of strength-based way. What made you really proud of what that child did in that interview? Questions like that, so that she could prep her in a way that was more framing it more positively than more negatively. And she kind of came up with that on her own as we were just kind of talking about the concept of vicarious resiliency. So we can't eliminate the exposure, but we definitely, as you said, bring an awareness to it and process it differently in our own minds and with our supervisors and with our colleagues.
Okay, so in yet another example of really parallel process at work, or maybe in this case, physician heal thyself is a good parallel idea. It's really about bringing the awareness to ourselves and about and our work, and about supervisors taking the lead to help guide the workforce in that direction. Laurie, what would be some resources that you would point people to if they were interested in pursuing this some more and learning a little more about it?
Well, I think that there's actually a really quick 30-item self-measure, brings a little self-awareness, and you can self-score it, called the ProQual, which is the Professional Quality of Life measure. And it actually looks at kind of how you may have been affected both positively and negative through your work. So it's measuring compassion satisfaction, as well as that compassion fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma. And just starting with that and having a quick kind of awareness of where you are on that scale. What, are you tipping higher on your compassion fatigue? Are you tipping higher on your compassion satisfaction? From that awareness, you can kind of decide and take some steps of what might you need to put in place to kind of bring those scales kind of more in balance. And there is a website for that. Again, it's ProQual, www.proqol, stands for professionalqualityoflife.org. And you just click on the tab for the measure, the test.
Okay, so that looks like a fairly straightforward and accessible self-assessment. What else would you recommend?
Yeah, there's a great national woman who I've heard multiple times at plenary sessions at multiple conferences through the nation, and her name is Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky, and she wrote a book called Trauma Stewardship, which, again, I think, gosh, I wish I read this when I started in the field, not 25 years later, but I have found myself, it's actually been 2 years since I read it first, but I've read it multiple times. There's a lot of good information in there, and it's really about how to help the helpers help themselves. So that is a great place for people that want more information or want some more tools to start there.
And I can see here that that book is hosted on a website called traumastewardship.com. That should be easy for people to find. And if you could give us the name of that author one more time.
Yes, it's Laura Van, two words, Vandernoot, D-E-R-N-O-O-T. And Lipsky is her last name, L-I-P-S-K-Y. And you can get it on Amazon or one of those sites.
So anyone with questions about these resources will be able to contact us. Our website is theacademy.sdsu.edu. Again, that's theacademy, all one word, .sdsu.edu. And when you go to that website, you'll see a Contact Us link, and you can send a general inquiry. Include the name of this podcast and the question that you have about the resource that you're looking for, and we'll get back to you. Laurie, any parting thoughts that you want to leave our audience with today?
No, I just think it's just super important that we bring this to the workforce, that we really try to emphasize those preventative measures, because if you're going to work in the field for many years, that cumulative effect will kind of zap you overnight, speaking from personal experience. So it's kind of one new concept that it is fairly new, but really has, for me, opened my eyes and really re-emphasized the importance of really having a balanced professional quality of life.
Laurie, this has been so informative, and I can't say enough about how much I and the Academy appreciate you spending the time to visit with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. The pleasure was all ours. Listen, you've been listening to the Coaching Corner today with Laurie Fortin, talking about vicarious resilience. We'll be right back. You've been listening to The Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches in the child welfare field. It's a production of the Academy for Professional Excellence, which in turn is a project of the School of Social Work, San Diego State University. If you'd like to reach us, we can be found at theacademy.sdsu.edu. Again, that's theacademy.sdsu.edu. Now, go out there and inspire our child welfare workforce to try something that they've never tried before.